Now, if you're older, if people are listening to this and they're in their 50s, I would still say do something. Do something. Don't just kind of raise the white flag of surrender and say, well, I guess the government's going to have to take care of me. It doesn't work that way. The government really can't take care of you. And do what you can. Something is better than nothing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I woke up today excited because we are going to talk about money. And I brought on the line Kate Stalter, and she is with Better Money Decisions. And we're going to get her take on the economy and what she does. She's a licensed investment advisor representative and the founder of Better Money Decisions, a fee-only investment advisory firm with offices, in a few states here. And she's an investment columnist here for Forbes, U.S. News, and World Report, TheStreet.com, Seeking Alpha, and host of the America Talks Money Financial Podcast. So, Kate, you got quite the background and quite the experience. I'm very curious to chat with you today about some different topics. Thanks for coming on the line with me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Kenneth. A lot of fun. I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording the show about how you and I have both kind of done a lot of financial writing, and that was kind of how I got into this industry. And as you mentioned, you talked about a few of the places. I was also on staff at Investors Business Daily for 10 years. And about 5 years ago, I got licensed because I really wanted to take this to the next level and be able to really, really help people in a way that could have some very tangible effects on their family tree, on their own ability to retire, live the life of their dreams. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun and really gratifying to be helping people in that way.
Sure. And what better to do than the things that you're passionate about? So that is awesome. Kate, I want to start you off with this. We have the stock markets hitting all-time highs here, kind of bouncing up and down against that all-time high number. And many people are worried. They're worried about war. They're worried about a struggling economy. Let's get your current thoughts on where we're at and how people should approach this.
Oh, sure. Happy to talk about this. So one thing, and let's get into the psychology a little bit. I'm not going to make economic predictions, and you'll hear why I'm not going to do that in just a second. But let's start off. I'll answer that by beginning with psychology. And kind of the way our minds, our brains are wired is we tend to believe that whatever is happening at the current moment in history, in the economy, is the worst it's ever been. That's just the way we feel, like things are horrible. You never hear, how about, Kenneth, do you ever hear people going around saying, things are awesome, they're so great? You'll be attacked for that, right? If you go around talking that way?
Sure.
So we live in this kind of, well, first of all, it's sort of the era, the zeitgeist. People are not optimistic. They just feel like things are horrible, even for after the most recent election. Even people who perhaps voted for Mr. Trump and I'm not making a political statement here. What I'm just saying is even the folks who maybe said, well, yeah, I did want him to be elected, even they are not optimistic at this point. And I think that's just sort of the zeitgeist we live in. The current climate is that everything is negative. You turn on the news, it's bad news. So we all, as Americans, we live in this very bountiful country with a lot of opportunity. You walk around, we have little computers that we carry around in our pockets. Kenneth, could your grandparents have imagined that?
No,
right?
I think things are changing at a degree that nobody can imagine what we have right now or what's going to be here in 10 years.
Totally. That's exactly right. I just came from a meeting this morning, a networking group here in Albuquerque where I live. And a friend of mine who is a health insurance agent, he stood up and presented, and he was talking about all these wonder drugs that we now have. There are conditions that, a generation ago would have absolutely killed people, and today you pop a pill. So I think we don't appreciate the progress. Our environment is so much cleaner than it used to be. I mean, when I was a child, it was things where there were more smokestacks. I was joking with some people that I lived in a building in New York City when I was a kid, and we actually had an incinerator in the building. So imagine that. You have apartment buildings in Manhattan with their own little smokestacks.
Wow.
I mean, you're right. You cannot even fathom that anymore. You know, we have these hybrid cars. Things are getting better all the time, but you wouldn't know it, would you?
Yeah, there's definitely something to that where people are, I don't know if it's naturally pessimistic. They just assume things are going to deteriorate. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's just our natural state where, you know, as we get older, we deteriorate. As we let food sit out, we deteriorate. If we do nothing, things deteriorate. You know what I mean? Like even if you're in your business and you're just being stagnant, you're probably going to deteriorate. You know, there's something about progress that is very powerful in terms of how to get ahead, and I think that's a very big thing. Okay, so let's talk about some of these some of these different areas here. You invest and you suggest to invest globally, not just in the U.S. So what is some of the reasons for this? You just talked about how rich and how amazing the U.S. is. Why not? Why go elsewhere?
Because we're not the only country that is developing and progressing. You know, there's innovation happening around the world. Now, one of the things that we show clients is we have this slide. It's really cool, and I could send it to you if you want to link it up, the show notes, whatever. It's a really cool slide. It shows the world, the investable assets around the world. Okay, so in other words, the publicly available stocks. Now, I have one for bonds as well, but the publicly available stocks that you can purchase from, say, not only the United States, but in Canada, the UK, Japan, Russia, China, Brazil, every country you can imagine, they have them on here, okay? And it shows you the percentage of the stock market. So the United States, and this will come as no surprise to your listeners, the United States accounts for a little over 50% of the investable assets in the world. So all the stocks you can purchase in terms of the market capitalization, the value, the U.S. is more than half. Okay, fine. You also have, though, Japan is about maybe 6 or 8%. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's something like that. The UK is right up there with that. Germany is maybe 3-4%. Canada is 3-4%. So in other words, you have all these countries around the world where you can purchase the shares. You can go on the market and purchase the shares of stocks of companies headquartered here. By the way, Kenneth, this surprises people. China is only 3%. And people think it's a lot more than that. But yeah, only 3% of the investable assets, equity assets in the world are from China. So the point is, what most U.S. investors do, you're watching CNBC, you're watching Bloomberg, you're seeing all this breathless coverage of what the Dow is doing. 30 stocks. 30 stocks. So we talk to people about you want the entire world, because that decade between 2000 and 2009, the S&P 500 was down 9.1%, had a negative return for that entire decade. Let me tell you something. There were asset classes from all around the world. Even small cap U.S. stocks did well. You had developed market, emerging market value stocks were through the roof, like 400% increase during that decade, even bonds. So the point is, if you limit yourself to the large cap U.S. stocks that we all know about, and I know a lot of people think, well, I got to buy gold, and that's that same thing about you're feeling scared and you want to buy gold. If you zero in on any one particular asset class, you are completely shortchanging yourself and losing out, and you're not smoothing the returns. The people who had a diversified portfolio between 2000 and 2009, They emerged from that decade in really, really good shape. The people who had only the large cap U.S. stocks, they suffered. They got scared. They bailed out at lows. And frankly, that's not an investment philosophy. That's a bet. So that's why we talk about investing in the world.
Yeah, no, good point. Kate, then so why are, and maybe this is lends to what you're already saying, but why are so many Americans seeing inferior portfolio returns?
A lot of reasons. One big reason. Okay, there's two things. The first is if you are invested in mutual funds and you have one of these expensive stockbrokers who gets commissions, then in that case, you better look very, very carefully at what you're paying. And it's really weird because people tend to not think about what they're paying for their investment advice. It's just the strangest thing. And, some of them think, well, I'm not paying an advisor. Well, you're buying newsletters, you're paying something. Other people that have something parked in a brokerage, the problem is the fees come out of the account. So they act like it's free. It's like the Mother Teresa School of Investment Management or something. These guys are not doing it for the good of mankind.
Right.
So, so that's one thing. And along those lines, too, a lot of these funds that are sold through brokers where they get commissions, you better look at the fees because some of them are upwards of 1% internal expense ratios. And then when you add commissions on top of that. So I would just encourage your listeners, if they do have a brokerage account, take a very, very careful look at that and see what you're paying. So that's one thing. And Morningstar has done a lot of research and shown that expenses and fees are one of the main inhibitors of portfolio performance. People think it's stock picking. It's not stock picking. It's the fees you're paying. On average, that makes a bigger difference. Second reason is that why people have poor returns. It does come back, actually. The stock picking in that case is an issue because if you're trading in and out and you're saying, oh, wow, I wanted the Snapchat IPO. Oops, I don't want Snapchat anymore. There's a commission every time you do that. And again, that comes back to cost. People don't think about the trading fees. There's commissions. You make the wrong bets. Again, that's betting. I'm just going to say this to people. If you have an account and you're picking single stocks, I'm sorry, that's gambling, and that adds a whole lot of risk and it just stands to reason, doesn't it, that if you have a portfolio comprised of assets from around the world, all market cap, that's going to smooth your return, and you're going to be tracking the market. This idea that you're going to beat the market, I got to tell you something. Even the professional gurus don't do it, but there's a whole lot of people out there, and I used to work at some of these places that are encouraging people with the idea, well, even though the pros with all their resources can't beat the market, you can. Yeah, there's no secret information anymore. Everybody has the same information. It's impossible for the person sitting at home on their laptop to trade as quickly as the pros. I mean, I think we all kind of learned that through Michael Lewis's work on his book about the high-frequency traders. So really, it's kind of this idea, watch your fees and don't be gambling. And that's the reason why people have poor returns, Kenneth.
Sure. Kate, let's talk then about, I think, the people who are most vulnerable right now to major swings in their portfolios. They got the most money, and they're at a point where they need it, and that's the baby boomers. They're trying to retire, and a lot of them are facing big challenges. What are these challenges, and what is your advice for these people?
Yeah, that's exactly who we work with, actually. Those are our clients, are the baby boomers, maybe people in their 50s, 60s, about to retire. And, it really depends, because the baby boomer, when you say that, those are people born starting in 1946, ending in 1964. So that's really hard to kind of lump that group together, even though we all do it. A person born in 1964 is still working.
Right. And
some of them even still have kids at home. That's a very different thing than a person born in 1946. So let's focus on the people maybe born in the 1950s and 60s, that group, who are kind of thinking about, like you said, they want to retire. They need a plan. You can't wing it. Things are way too complicated today. You can't just wing it. People don't have the pensions anymore. The corporate pensions don't exist like they did in previous generations. I mean, my dad had corporate pensions, but let me tell you something. Even for him, and my dad is 78 years old, even for him, he worked for Kodak, and I'm sure you know what happened there, or that company kind of imploded and had a lot of problems, and his pension got taken away. So you can't count on these things anymore. So for a lot of people, if you're in your 50s and you're working, please keep stashing money in your corporate 401k. Do not listen to this nonsense about how the 401ks are too expensive and you shouldn't be contributing. Yeah, a lot of the plans are horrible. I'm not going to disagree. But a forced savings plan, like if you force yourself to save and keep salting away money, in that case, I'm going to have to say, you know, have your advisor look at your 401k plan, have a second person look at it, give you an opinion about what your allocation should be. If you can find some of the less expensive funds, make sure you're allocated around the world. So that's one thing from an investment standpoint. You know, the other one is, and I get this, I see a lot of people who just feel like, oh, I'm tired of working. I want to kick back. I want to take it easy. I'm tired of working for the man. In that case, please do not just say, I'm quitting today, because we don't have this big safety net out there. Social Security is not going to be enough. I'm not one of these people who says Social Security is going bankrupt. It's not. You know, there's a lot of scare tactics out there for the boomer generation, for Gen Xers. Pretty certain Social Security is going to be there for you. But you need a plan. It's really, that's what it is, Kenneth, is if you need somebody to look at what your assets are, what you want to do, because it's about what you want to do in life. And that's ultimately what the money is for. It's not to gamble. It's not to beat the market. It's not to play games with it. The money is there to sustain your lifestyle and for those decades when you can no longer work. And that's really what it's about.
Kate, yeah, and it's great. It's great advice. I don't know if I definitely see that there's some issues out there that, you know, I could definitely see some problems. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I trust necessarily Social Security to be around for me. I'm 29 years old, and hey, there's a lot of time between now and the time I retire. Mm-hmm. And even if it's just from a simply inflation adjusted perspective, right. I'm not counting on that whatsoever.
I wouldn't doubt that your benefit might be cut. I think that's correct. I'm not sure they would eliminate it entirely for people, you know, who are alive and paying attention right now. Like for your kids, perhaps, you know what I'm saying? But like for somebody your age, I would not doubt at all that your benefit might be cut. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and it does suck. I mean, people are paying for it with their taxes, and you know, they expect something for it. There's a lot of people receiving things from the government that aren't paying anything. And the people that are paying for their Social Security, it's like, well, at least I'm putting something into it. I'd like to get something back from it. But it's still such a Ponzi scheme when we start getting into that whole can of worms there.
Hey, let me just interject something. I know you're moving on to a new point, but if your listeners want to learn more about the Social Security and the kind of problem that it could have, there is a book by a guy, professor called Lawrence Kotlikoff, and it's called Get What's Yours, and you can get it on Amazon, and it gives you a whole lot of information about what's really going on with the system. So I'm just going to interject that if your listeners are interested in learning more.
Sure. Hey, no, thank you, and I'll take a look at it as well. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about, you know, the benefits of planning for today. You have the quote that says, "Hey, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is today." Well, let's talk about this philosophy, the importance of investing now and not losing out on our most valuable resource, which is time.
Yeah. Oh, great point. That is so true. So I would guess that you probably have maybe some listeners from the millennial generation. Would that be true?
It's across the board, but yes.
Okay, perfect. You're absolutely right. The younger you are, the start now. If there's somebody's listening to this episode and you're 25, 30 years old and you're like, oh, I'm not making a lot of money at my job, I'm barely squeaking by. I get that. I do understand that. And, everybody kind of feels that way at one point, I think, unless you're lucky enough to be one of these, corporate, have a very high paying corporate job in a big city. And I'll address both of those people. But, the trick is start early. Do not tap into the retirement account. So if you're in your 20s or 30s right now, my advice to you would be, if you have an employer account, just stash the money away, even if it means a little bit less in your take-home pay. It'll reduce your tax bill if you do that. So that's the flip side. Start stashing it away. Take advantage of the decades of compounding. I can't tell you how many people come to our office and they're in their 50s or 60s and they say, I wish I had started this 20, 30 years ago. And it's really sad because it's so true. It's like, wow, if you had started investing in your 20s or 30s and just taken advantage of compounding, it's almost like you have to invest less. So in other words, you can take, I'm just making this up, but $100 from your paycheck when you're in your 20s and start investing that in a qualified account like a 401k or an IRA. The person who's in their 50s and having to start doing that, they're going to have to put a whole lot more away, and they probably never are going to save as much as the person who started earlier in their 20s.
Sure.
So that's really important. Now, if you're older, if people are listening to this and they're in their 50s, I would still say do something. Do something. Don't just kind of raise the white flag of surrender and say, well, I guess the government's going to have to take care of me. It doesn't work that way. The government really can't take care of you. And do what you can. Something is better than nothing. There's also, I don't advise these across the board, but sometimes there are even certain types of annuity accounts. I know for a lot of people, annuity is a bad word, but it doesn't have to be. There are certain types of annuities that if you feel like, oh, I need to lock up the money from myself to prevent myself from spending it, you can do that. There are definitely things to do. I would advise people, for maybe people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are listening to this, I would say reach out to a fee-only fiduciary financial advisor, fee-only fiduciary, okay, and start looking at a plan. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you probably don't need that, but look for something very inexpensive. So either your company's 401k plan, or you can open an IRA at one of these robo-advisors like Betterment, something like that, and they put you in really inexpensive ETFs, and they rebalance it for you, and you're invested in the world, just like you and I were talking about, Kenneth. They have this global allocation. So that's really how that proverb comes back to life, is there some very specific things people can be doing.
Yeah. Well, and even for people that are in their 50s, right? I mean, people are living now into their 80s and beyond. And hey, if they want to do something for their kids, you're starting to invest now, and investing as if you're investing for your children in 30, 40 years, that's a powerful compounding return. I think we get to this idea that the money needs to be ready for us right at 60, or right at 65. And instead of looking at it from more of a really long-term perspective, even if you are older. Now, there's different situations, of course. Not everyone is in the same boat. And some people actually do need that money. And that's the negative, right, of not preparing yourself and having to kill the cow versus being able to drink the milk. And I've used that example with just some of my family and friends, and it's like, you can kill the cow by spending that principal and then not having anything to show for it, or investing that money, letting it grow, and just drinking the milk from it and having that cow around for years. And I think that's very powerful and something people can benefit from. Well,
let me add something to that too, because one of the fastest growing demographics in this country is just crazy, is people living to 100. So the number of people living to 100 grew by 43% in the last decade. And then the number of people living into their 90s is even higher than that. So, a lot of people, when we tell them that, they just kind of roll their eyes and they say, I don't want to live to 100. Yeah, but you know what? More and more people are. So the way that you framed that is exactly right. You don't want to kill that cow and eat it all at once. You want milk to drink until you're 100 years old. Is really what you want, Yeah.
That's funny. Wow. So I definitely want to look into that. I know intuitively that's happening, but I haven't seen statistics on how people are living and how they're living longer. I've seen some different technologies where, they're going to put our brains into other people's bodies and robots and different things like that. Or give us these internal life type situations. And I don't know how good that is. Yeah. But
Frankenstein.
Yeah. But definitely the landscape is changing on that, and the paradigm of when the slowdown age is certainly changing. So, Kate, I want to give you some words here, opportunity for some final advice for the audience, some general advice, and obviously, if people want to learn more about you, where would they go and what would they find?
Okay, well, the final piece of advice I would give, my book is called Don't Let Your Money Kick the Bucket Before You Do. And that is really, it is aimed at more of the sort of people in their 50s and 60s. But again, even younger people who want to take a longer time horizon should think about that. The whole idea is cut costs, save while you can, and really make sure that you're invested in the world, not making individual bets on something like a Snapchat or Uber when it comes public, and trying to swing for the fences. That does not work. So that's the advice. My website is bettermoneydecisions.com. The podcast is America Talks Money. There's a website for that. And like I said, the book is Don't Let Your Money Kick the Bucket Before You Do. That's on Amazon. And, happy to chat with anybody. If you have questions, you can reach out to me through the Better Money Decisions website. Happy to answer any questions people have.
All right. Well, Kate, thanks for coming on the show with me and sharing your words of advice and your experience, years of experience here. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Kenneth. I've really enjoyed this.